I'm Lucy.
And I'm Jennifer.
You're listening to Everything I Know About.
Each week, we share everything we know about a new topic, equipped with some internet research and a little too much exposure to pop culture. Hey, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
So today, we are kind of jumping off of our breakup episode a little bit. We're going to be talking about porn addiction, sex addiction, how porn changes your brain, how porn affects your relationships.
Well, I feel like the way you introduce this as a jumping off of our relationship episode might lead people to believe that that is why your relationship ended. But no, this has nothing to do with that.
Oh my God, you're so right. I need to clarify for the people. Porn and cheating and all of that did not personally happen to me. The reason that this is a jumping off point is we had a wonderful listener reach out to us and she wanted us to cover this topic. So it's something that we've kind of had floating around in our own notes and just never really didn't have the right angle for it. But coming at it from the lens of how is this affecting your relationships? What is cheating? What is not? What is addiction? What is not? That was a really accessible angle for us and something that we could actually dive into. Like, to me, the morality of who's going on like Pornhub is not that interesting, but the psychological phenomena of how it affects you is very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then just happenstance, I just finished this book called Rejection by Tony Tulathamut. I doubt I'm saying his name correctly. It's a short story collection, and literally every single short story features somebody who was rejected. It's been labeled as the first incel book. So it was a really interesting read. Yeah, it's told from the perspective of all these like characters that you really hate. So I feel like I was able to enter the psyche a little bit more, maybe, of people who are drawn to porn because they feel so sexually repressed and rejected by potential sexual partners in society.
That is such a hot take, Lucy.
To be clear, I'm not saying I have sympathy for incels.
No. I'm thinking it's so funny that you're like, you have a porn addiction? You are an incel.
That's the hot take. Well,
that's the hot take.
I mean, no, they're obviously separate topics, but I feel like they're, at least from my perspective as a woman, they're like in the same universe. Because often, I mean, I don't know a ton about incels. Like, I read this one book, okay, but my understanding of it has always been incels are these men who become incels, like they hate women because they cannot find a sexual partner who wants to be with them. And so then they turn to these chat rooms that are all male, very toxic, about hating women. And they also turn to porn because that's the only way that they can get their desires met.
Yep. Yeah, that is definitely one symptom. One of the things that we had listed before we started our research was, why do people even get addicted to porn in the first place? Because neither Lucy nor I have this issue. So unfortunately, we had to...
We can't speak from personal
Not unfortunately. No, we can't speak from personal experience here. So really had to put the empathy cap on and dig into the research on why people even do this in the first place. And it's something I've always been interested in. Like, why are people going on OnlyFans? Why is that something that's interesting to you to like pay a subscription service to see exclusive photos of porn stars? That just does not compute in my brain as something that you would ever desire to do. And yet there's people spending like significant amounts of money every month doing this, ruining their relationships over it. I'm like, what is that about? Similarly, people who watch porn every day or, I don't know, have it in their Reddit feeds and like when they're flipping through, see porn videos as they're like scrolling through other articles. Like, this is the thing that happens frequently. And you're like, what is that about? Like, to me, that would jump scare me hardcore. If I was just like scrolling through my Reddit feed and saw some fucking going on, I'd be like, what? Jump scare? But to so many people, it's so desensitized and it's just there. Yeah, so we really had to put on the empathy caps, do some research, figure out what's going on there. And certainly incel culture is one slice of the pie.
Yeah. I didn't dig that deep into this, but as I was doing research, I came across this stat that was like 60% of people have looked at porn on their work computer.
What?
It blows my mind. Yeah.
On their work computer? That has to qualify for an addiction at that point. That's destructive behavior.
Yeah, well, we'll get into it. Maybe now because people work from home more, like it's their like work computer, but they're not like doing it at the office. Certainly doing it at the, like that just, I cannot even compute that. But I think watching a lot of porn is very, very common. And there's different extents to which you can do it, right? There's like watching porn. And then there's like, even when I know it's not appropriate or I don't even want to do it, I feel a compulsion to watch porn. And that's more of the world that we're going to be discussing today.
Totally. And do you have any personal experience being with a partner who had this issue?
I have not. There have been like relationships when I was younger where like we weren't emotionally mature enough to have discussions around it, and it never like came out into the
Mm.
open. I think it was just more of like a this is happening secretly, but we're like never gonna discuss this. How about you?
I have, yes.
Tell us about your situation.
Okay, so I dated somebody who my Reddit feed story was actually from experience. So this person was in a lot of subreddits that, like, I guess there are straight up porn subreddits. I did not know this, but there are. So he would have like informational subreddits and then the porn subreddits. So when he was flipping through his feed, there would literally be like clips happening. And then next article is like a science article. And you're like, what? What is going? And his brain was like so desensitized to it. But it was very weird because this might be too explicit to put, so we might have to cut this out, but I'm just going to say it anyway. There are some subreddits that are like pornographic subreddits that are quite, I think, harmful. There's one called God Pussy,
Okay.
and men post pictures of their girlfriends, wives, partners who have like beautiful vaginas. And then people are like, yeah, God Pussy, like rate them. And he was subscribed to this subreddit and just like getting it in his feed. So obviously I felt a way about
Yeah.
that. It was so weird. It was so strange to me. And he like knew the porn stars that he liked by name, knew things about them, would follow them on socials. And his favorite porn star, who I asked why she was his favorite, and it was like, she just has such a beautiful body. Her tits are perfect. Like, she's such a sweet aura. All of this, like, very
Oh my
specific stuff
God.
about her. She ended up dying when we were together. And he cried for like 3 days. I was like depressed about it. Like, had to talk to his therapist
Whoa.
about it.
Do you know if he had ever like messaged her or like DM'd her?
I don't know.
That's the next level, right? Like it starts with what you're describing, but then that level of emotional connection where he's, I mean, I guess it's kind of like she's an influencer to him and then he's upset, right? It
Yeah.
makes sense that he'd be upset. But
Yeah. Does it?
people get upset when they're like, you know, the influencer they follow, something bad happens to them.
Sure, but like the woman that you're like your favorite porn star.
Yeah,
Come on.
yeah.
I mean, this is crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And now I have kind of a thing about social media followings. Like I always check a man's social media followings from that experience because I'm like, this actually tells me a lot about you and your
Yeah.
values.
We've talked about parasocial relationships before in the context of celebrities, influencers, but then this is just strange because it's with a porn star. But then it kind of makes sense why I tried really hard to find like percentages or statistics around how many people that watch porn regularly end up actually contacting a porn star or contacting someone via DM online. I've always been interested, how common is that? And unfortunately, there is no data because a lot of this is underground. People are not admitting to it necessarily, and there's like no statistics. But I have to imagine like some of that psychology is you are thinking you have an actual relationship. It's like parasociality with this porn star. And then that's why people tip them and pay them and all of this. They don't
Yeah.
recognize that it's like, I don't know, millions of men feel that way about that person.
Yeah, that experience with my ex was the first time that I knew that people did that to that level because this was a little bit before OnlyFans was a thing. I had always just conceptualized porn as some very detached thing that you watch. You're not involved with the people. Like, I don't know any porn stars' names. It's just something that you like throw up on Pornhub, you watch a video, and that's the end of it. And then to find out that people have favorites and they follow the people and they know
Yeah.
things about their lives. It was just a totally different world to me that I couldn't even imagine being a part of. And I'm like, what goes on in your brain that you're like watching something and want to get so involved that you want to make it a personal, like parasocial thing?
Yeah, well, you know, Khloe Kardashian,
Yeah.
her ex-husband Lamar got a blow-up doll of her. Like it looks like her. As you're talking about this, I'm like, men be doing crazy shit. Like, can you imagine?
Wait, after they got divorced?
Yeah, they've been divorced for a long time.
I'm shocked. That honestly good for her.
I don't think she was flattered. She was like, wow, we are really different people, clearly. Like you were saying, it lets me in on a bit of your psyche, and I just really cannot understand that, you know?
Honestly, if my ex got a blow up doll of me, I'd be
You'd
like,
be
"Slay."
flattered.
Like, you're never getting over me. Oh my God. I also had an ex that I found out was on OnlyFans right after we broke up.
As a creator?
I believe he was cheating on me with a girl who had an OnlyFans, and I wanted to
Oh.
confirm. So I subscribed to her OnlyFans and found him on the OnlyFans.
You consider that cheating, him being on her OnlyFans. And do you know if he was just...
Oh, no, let me clarify. He was in the video. He was a participant.
Wait, I did not understand that.
see it. No. He wasn't like subscribed to her. He was in the video
Oh.
with her.
Okay. So obviously,
So yes, very much cheating.
I was for a second. I was like, wait, I didn't realize you could see who else is subscribed. That seems like
I don't
people
think
would
you
not
can.
want that. Yeah, I'm sure you can't because that would be like a privacy issue.
You can see who like comments on it. Like you can see people's usernames. Everybody's
Okay.
username is anonymous though.
Yes,
So,
yes.
but no. I physically saw his form.
Girl, you need to date better men. Like that's the conclusion
I know.
here.
My picker is off. Clearly.
Jeez.
We're practicing discernment from now on.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I attract the good ones. But anyway, yeah, that was definitely cheating in my book.
Yes. I don't think that's questionable.
No, but I do think this question of if you watch porn, is that cheating, is actually very interesting. And there were more articles and more studies on this than I was expecting. I thought this was going to be something that when I start researching, we're going to find like Atlantic articles or, thought pieces. Very much not the case. This is something that marriage and family therapists and sex therapists have studied pretty extensively. There's true literature on it. And the conclusions are they're not well defined, I'll put it that way. There is a schism in the psychology community of whether or not porn is actually A, something that you can be addicted to, and B, something that should be considered cheating. We'll get into the specifics, but pretty much it boils down to what is your agreement with your partner. And most monogamous couples assume that their partner has the same view on porn that they do because they're like, we're monogamous, but either because we're monogamous, porn does qualify as cheating, or we're monogamous, so me looking but not touching, not interacting, this is totally digital. Of course, it doesn't qualify as cheating. So then when that cognitive dissonance comes to the surface, it feels like a betrayal for both parties, honestly.
Okay, so basically, like, there is no one definition of cheating. It just depends on whatever the social contract is between you and your partner specifically.
Yes. So there actually is an absolute criteria for cheating. It is secretive physical or emotional engagement with someone outside of the relationship. And psychologists say it's hard for porn to check this box because there's no touch and almost never any communication.
Yeah. So that kind of aligns with my view. I would say if you're just watching porn, I wouldn't consider that cheating. But if you are starting to engage, even if there's no like touch, I guess, but if you're like DMing or messaging someone who works in the porn industry and you're like a fan of theirs and you're flirting, I guess, that addition of contact to me would push it into cheating territory.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think there's even levels below that. I don't know that I would necessarily call it cheating, but I would definitely ask my partner to stop. And if they didn't, I think it would be grounds to end the relationship. If they're like following Instagram models, porn stars and such on social media, I would not like that. I would find that disrespectful personally. I would want them to stop. And if you refuse to, I'm like, what are we prioritizing here? Why would you not choose me over the porn star you're following? Again, that like gets to maybe not cheating in and of itself, but it's the expectation setting and the boundary crossing that is really like the true emotional cheating.
Yeah. Man, I'm so glad I haven't had to deal with this. Definitely, I don't have this issue with Avery. I'm trying to think if previous guys have ever followed Instagram models. I guess I don't really know. Maybe I haven't like dug deep enough, but I do think it would bother me. But then I think I would spiral. I'd be like, why does it bother me? What would I do if I was in their shoes? And like, I don't follow male porn stars, obviously, but like,
No.
Do I think male actors are attractive? Yeah. Do I think people on the street are attractive? Yeah. I think I would just go into a spiral about like, where is the line? It feels very difficult to draw it, you know?
Yeah, I've thought about this extensively too, because I've had a similar reaction. I'm like, okay, I think similar to you, movie stars are hot, people on the street are hot. Is that a problem that I think that? But then I go, okay, I'm not going out of my way to like follow actors that I think are really hot so I can see them on my feed. You know?
Yeah.
I don't do that. I don't see somebody at a bar and try to find them on Instagram just so I can see them more often.
Okay.
Like, that is so strange to me. I'm like, what? There's such a difference to me between recognizing that somebody's attractive. That's just like a biological inevitability. That's going to happen. But then taking it a step further to try to like engage, keep in touch, see it all the time is for what purpose? For what purpose? What are we doing?
Yeah. I think that's like maybe more clear if that person that they're following, this sounds bad, but like their main value is their attractiveness. They're not a singer or an actress or they have some other thing that you can be into. It's like literally all they do is they post pool selfies. Then I'm like, weird behavior.
Yeah, literal thirst traps all the time. I would feel so strange. I've seen like the thirst trap instas for men, and maybe this is just like a male female thing, but it turns me off completely. I'm like, this is so cringe. Like, even if the person is objectively attractive, just the fact that they're doing that makes them unattractive to me. Like
Yeah.
somebody's social media presence can like completely ruin the persona for me. And I'm like, if your entire feed is just look how hot I am, I'm like, I'm no longer attracted to you.
Right.
So for the calculus there to be so different for a man that I was involved with, it actually would turn me off to the man. I'd be like, why do you find this attractive? This is cringe.
I don't know. This cringe thing is interesting because as part of me posting on social media all the time now, and you as well for our business, I've had to like get over the cringe factor because part of the cringe is like that you think you're so special, you're like setting up the lights and the camera and like all of that. And so like
Yeah.
when I see the whatever thirst traps, I'm like, wow, you really think you're hot stuff. And like that's not attractive. It's way more attractive to like not know you're hot, you know, than like
Yeah.
really know and like really lean into it. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough because I'm like, but you know, they're making money, you know, good for them. It's not cringe because they're like turning it into a lifestyle.
Yeah. No, I kind of want to clarify too. Like to me, it would be cringe if my partner followed them. Like I would be cringed out by my partner, not by the creator. Like, I don't know, the female creator, do what you want. I'm not against it. Get your money, get your bag. It's fine. But like my partner being like, oh yeah, I want to like see her get her bag. I'm going to follow her. Like I'm like interested in this. I'm like, that's so fucking cringe. Why?
Yeah.
Now that I'm dating again and like my algorithm is reflecting that, I'm getting all of these single women going on dates and stuff on social media. And so many people talk about how one of the first things they do is look at a man's Instagram following. If they see sus stuff, it's immediate.
Red flag. Yeah.
You're done. Yeah. So I think this is pretty commonly held thing. I actually did that the other day. Somebody asked before we went on a date to like share Instagrams and I looked at his stuff and like, I was like, oh, hell no. And I like blocked him.
Discernment.
Yeah.
Learned your lesson.
Truly.
Love a girl
Truly.
who grows.
So much growth to do. Okay. So yeah, again, the agreement on what is cheating, what's not, does porn qualify is like, it's really just about the conversation. But I did find it interesting that there's this camp of psychologists who are marriage and family psychologists mostly, who think that porn usage is incredibly problematic. And they actually define it as relationship trauma. And there's this other camp that is far more liberal in their definition of what is control. And they think that telling somebody what to do with their porn use is actually a form of bodily control over another. So I want to parse out these two viewpoints because I think this is where people get into a lot of gnarly fights with their partner if the subject of porn comes up. And unfortunately, from the literature, both of these viewpoints are valid. So let's start with how porn deteriorates a relationship and can be considered trauma. So there was actually a study done about this, 200 women whose husbands were participating in extramarital activity. And more often than not, this activity was purely online. The results show that even when the behavior was limited to online sexual activity, the results were that they lose trust in their loved ones, feel the need to seek assistance and assurance. And because of the like significant negative consequences and the trauma that the partner feels, formerly, I'm going to say women here because it probably is mostly women dealing with porn addicted men. But these women were classified as codependent in the literature. And now they're starting to redefine that definition as like, no, this isn't codependency. This is actually like a valid trauma response to something that is a betrayal. So I thought that was really interesting that women were kind of seen as the ones having a problem for having a problem.
Of course. Doesn't surprise me.
No, of course not. What is really interesting about this is the sense of betrayal is actually extremely similar, if not identical, for people who have online betrayals and in-person betrayals. So the non-using partner feels the same level of emotional pain and distancing that someone who like truly has a traditional affair would feel.
That's surprising. Yeah.
I thought that was really, really interesting.
I guess it's surprising because I feel like society's perception would be that online cheating is not as serious. So it's interesting that there's actual studies proving that it has the same exact emotional effect.
Totally. And the reason that these studies are not super well conducted, I guess I would say, or like very well regarded by all psychologists is because the level of online use varies so much and people's feelings about it vary so much that it's really, really difficult to get quantitative data on this. So we might say, you know, a guy watches porn once a month. That's not going to have the same psychological effect we know intuitively as somebody who's watching it like 3 times a day. That emotional impact of the 3 times a day is potentially the same impact as being cheated on in person. But there isn't these lines of demarcation during these studies. It's kind of just, are they participating in the behavior or not?
I see. Yeah.
Yeah. At its base, though, again, it's the secrecy that causes the emotional damage. So it's that loss of trust there. On the other side of things, psychologists who defend porn-seeking behavior say that since it doesn't meet the absolute criteria of cheating, it's really hard to fault these men for participating in porn usage. They say that most people watch for some sort of stress relief or anxiety reduction. And it's not so much about sex as it is about a biological, physical release. And so you're not connecting with the performers, you're connecting with your own body. And you cannot tell others what to do with their own bodies. And unless they themselves have agreed not to watch porn, you don't have agency over another person's body. And if you do, this leads to unhealthy power dynamics, reinforces a relationship culture of insecurity and surveillance, and is deeply shameful for both parties involved.
Yeah.
You seem skeptical.
Well, I mean, obviously you cannot control another person's body, but I feel like you could have a discussion and be like, I, as your partner, am not okay with this. It's hurting me. And then they need to make a decision about what's more important, right? And if they still are like, I don't care if that's hurting you, I mean, then maybe it's not even about the porn at that point. It's like, why don't you care that you're hurting me? I guess maybe these psychologists would say like, well, their needs are equally as valid.
Yeah, essentially.
I do agree that like, you can't really blame someone for watching porn just because, especially nowadays, how young people get exposed. People get exposed to porn when they're like in 3rd grade now. And obviously your brain is, I mean, you're a child. One, you shouldn't be, but because of the nature of the internet, you are, and your brain is not even fully developed. Like you can't make conscious decisions about it. And so then if you do start to develop an addiction, like become reliant on it, is it really your fault? I don't know. Like that does feel like really hard because I think even from like when we were kids, it's just even worse now. We may do an episode on this in the future, but I was listening to another podcast talk about this show called Social Studies, which is a fascinating documentary. The documentarian was able to film what teenagers actually saw on social media and like saw on their phones and then overlay that on top of documentary footage. And these teenagers were like openly talking about BDSM, pornography, and the parents were asking like, wait, I had no idea that you were exposed to that. When were you exposed to that? And they were like, 3rd grade. Yeah, like everybody knows about this. All the high school boys want to do BDSM to us because they think that's what we're into and we're like shamed if we're not kinky enough.
What?
Yeah, these like high school girls were saying that. So,
oh my God.
How can you blame the kid in that situation who then becomes an adult? And I mean, of course, they're an adult. They should be able to make their own decisions later in life, but I don't know. It kind of like brings us into this next topic of addiction. Is it real? Like, is your brain actually changing or is it all in your head?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I did see something about early porn exposure that it does change the neuroplasticity of your brain and it does change your sexual preferences as you develop. A quote I have here is early exposure to pornography during the formative years of adolescence has been linked to long-term effects on sexual maturation, sexual behavior, internet addiction, and overall personality development.
Yeah.
Pretty wild. But even though we know porn changes your brain, and we'll get into the science of that later, I don't think it's an excuse still. I'm not with these psychologists that are like, you know, it's their body, they can do what they want. Maybe to a certain degree. Like, I think there's a fine line. If you're gone for 2 months or something, I think your partner could probably like go online a few times. It's fine. You know, like whatever. In a long distance relationship or something like that personally would not bother me. But I don't think that's what we're talking about here. I think more often than not, when this becomes an issue, it's because it's something that is so pervasive, so deeply hurtful in the relationship that it becomes a huge problem. And at that point, you have to ask, like, what are you seeking here? What emotional validation, you name it, thing are you seeking outside of the relationship? And that's the thing that's crumbling trust. So to try to say that you're invalidating somebody's bodily autonomy, I don't really buy that unless you are literally saying like you're not allowed to masturbate, which is not what we're talking about here. The other piece of the psychological defenders is actually like this kink and BDSM thing that you brought up. Some sex therapists say that there are psychological sexual needs that people have that they don't necessarily want to play out in real life or their partner wouldn't be open to. And porn is a way to get their needs met. And we have to be open to it. And actually being shameful about porn and suppressing it does way more harm to the relationship than good.
Yeah, I do buy that. I don't know, maybe just because I recently read Rejection, the book, but a lot of those characters struggled with that.
Yeah.
They had nowhere to turn, you know, like, I don't know. It's hard for people.
It is hard.
Whatever reason you're initially brought to porn. Again, we're not talking about the morality of porn in this episode. We're really talking about porn addiction. And so, is it an addiction? What defines addiction? Before we get into like sex and porn addiction specifically, I do think it's important to just set a baseline on like addiction more broadly. The two elements for when something becomes an addiction are that the behavior is seeking reward or pleasure, and then the existence of conflict around this behavior. So it actually has to cause self-harm or harm to those in your life. And this pleasure-seeking behavior, I think, is an interesting distinction because that's what separates an addiction from a compulsion. Like OCD is a compulsion. You're doing behaviors that you aren't necessarily in full control of, but those behaviors don't bring you pleasure. And so we all are probably more familiar with alcohol, drugs as addictions. And I think it's more commonly easily accepted now that those types of addictions are a disease. And it does actually impact your brain because the substances that you're intaking are literally changing your brain pathways. Like we've done an episode about how drinking can change your brain. And so I was really curious, does watching porn or does sex addiction have similar effects as drugs and alcohol, or does it not? And then if it doesn't, what makes it still qualify as an addiction, or is it somehow less serious? Or like, is that why there's some skepticism around this? So that's the question that I looked into. So the definition of sex addiction or hypersexuality is an intense focus on sexual fantasies, urges, or activities that can't be controlled and cause distress and harm your health, relationships, career, or other aspects of your life. It is not in the DSM, which is the Bible of psychology, and it was actually rejected in 2013 because of a lack of evidence. In 2018, it was added to the World Health Organization's list of diseases. In general, there's actually quite a lot of disagreement about whether it's an addiction. There are a few reasons why people disagree. So one, because we don't have a lot of information about what constitutes normative sexual behavior, we cannot actually conclude what is deviant. And labeling something as a disease can stigmatize human sexuality, which would be bad, and we don't want to do that. But then the other perspective, of course, is, well, are you just denying a bunch of people's experiences? If they're telling the medical community that they're struggling with addiction, they're telling their partner they're struggling with addiction, if you're like, well, actually, you could just stop, and that's like invalidating their experience.
I'm very pleased that sex addiction is not in the DSM. I think it's a really great way for people to avoid accountability. We don't have a great definition of what hyperarousal disorder would be. Like, how would you even define it? I agree that it would be incredibly difficult to find the line of demarcation between healthy sexual expression and like what defines an addiction. Mm-hmm. And if you are cheating on your partner, do you just get to claim that you have an addiction and your partner needs to support you like they would if you're an alcoholic? Mm-hmm. I don't think so. And I think the reason that it's different is because alcohol and drugs are external stimuli that are affecting your brain chemistry. Everyone has sex. It's part of our normative biology. So I don't know, I guess unless you have some disease in your neural pathways, sex is affecting you differently. You're just using a compulsive behavior to cover up your emotional problems, which yes, that is the foundation of addiction. But alcohol, cocaine, other types of drugs actually are introducing chemicals that are changing your neural pathways in a way that having sex is not. It's internal to you. So that's the thing that really makes it difficult for me. Even food, I think, would qualify as more of an addiction because that's external.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about gambling?
I mean, it's kind of the same thing to me, right? Like you're engaging in a behavior, but you're not getting any drug stimulus thing. It's a compulsive behavior.
The reason I asked about gambling is because it used to be classified under a compulsion, and then it was given its own, now it is in the DSM as a disease. So some people think that that's what's going to happen with sex addiction, is that it will be like gambling, whereas we just don't know that much about it right now. It's like pretty new. Like it only started really coming up since the invention of the internet, so 1990s. And they think that with more research, it will eventually make its way into the DSM.
Okay, I'm sorry, give me a fucking break. What do porn addiction, sex addiction, and gambling addiction have in common?
Men do them?
Yes, men do them. Men do them.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like I know so many stories of women too.
Of course they do. But these are overwhelmingly diseases brought on by men, right? So it's not a problem, it's a disease. What's something that women do that would just be considered a behavioral problem but not a disease? Maybe a shopping addiction. Should we throw that in there too? If you're buying off of Shein too much, is that suddenly a disease and your partner needs to support you? No, same fucking thing with gambling. I'm sorry. Like, I think it's a way for men to avoid accountability for their shitty behavior.
Yeah. I think like the capitalist lens on this as well is because anytime something is labeled as a disease, a lot of people can make money off of that because then rehab centers, like when I was Googling, so many of the sources, and I didn't use these as sources, but so many of the resources were just rehab clinics from like all over the US. And a scientist was talking about this in one of the articles I read. He was like, there haven't been a lot of funds directed towards scientific research that might challenge the existence of sex addiction because there's a lot of interest in people claiming it's a disease, even if it's not like formally defined, because you can make money from treating it.
Yeah. And I want to clarify too, I'm not saying that these people don't have a problem. Obviously, if you're like compulsively gambling or compulsively having sex, you have a problem. But your problem is not sex or gambling. Your problem is like some hole in your soul that you're trying to fill with this behavior. Like when you are addicted to cocaine, you will go through withdrawals if you don't have the cocaine. It's very different. You will be okay if you stop gambling or having sex or like shopping, if we want to throw in the shopping addiction. It's not the same thing.
Yeah. You can literally die from alcohol withdrawal. So.
Yeah.
And it does mostly affect men. Sex addiction appears to affect about 3 to 10% of the general US population. And for every 2 to 5 males with hypersexuality, 1 woman is affected. And the addiction begins on average at 18 years of age. And most individuals don't reach out for professional help until age 37.
When they're getting their first divorce due to their addiction. Yeah.
Many individuals, 88%, also have a history of other mental health conditions too, including mood disorders, anxiety disorders, OCD, impulse control disorders, ADHD.
Yeah, it's the underlying problem.
But what you were saying earlier about how it is different from drugs and alcohol, I found a couple studies looking specifically at brain activity. And you would think that when we're looking at something physical like the brain, that it would be hard for these studies to contradict each other, but they actually do. So there's not a ton of studies about it. I found 2. One from 2013 that looked at 59 people, 39 were men, 13 were women, and measured how the brains of people who struggle with sex addiction respond to porn. The hypothesis was that if sex can be addictive in the clinical sense, which means that the neural response of sex addicts to porn mimics the neural responses of drug or alcohol addicts to the drug of their choice. In that study, researchers did not find that the brains reacted in the same way at all. In fact, the brain response varied only based on different levels of sexual libido, rather than whether someone identified as having a sexual addiction, sexual compulsions, or not. And so people with higher libidos had more active brain reactions to porn. The argument against this study is that the problem with some of this term sex addiction is that it immediately assumes that you can apply the same kinds of research methodologies and treatments that you would use for substance addiction. And there are no sex receptors in the brain to develop tolerance or dependence the way there is with alcohol or drug abuse. And so there's not a lot of physical symptoms of sex addiction. You know, you don't experience withdrawal symptoms. You don't experience seizures. So like, how can you really measure it? And so how can you say that if you can't measure it, it invalidates it, is the argument against this study. The other study I'll cover is from 2014, a Cambridge study where they looked at 19 male patients. So, I mean, these are small studies as well. They performed brain scans on 19 men watching porn, and what they found was that the same reward centers of the brain are activated as when drug addicts use their drug of choice. So their conclusion was it is similar, but even that study, not without its detractors. I have a quote from the CEO of a brain research company who says, in the case of porn addictions, the brain does look similar to other addictions, but only up to a point, and then it diverges. So when you look at porn, you get increases in learning and reward, but you don't see some of the other hallmarks of addiction, such as gambling, when you see that the brain actually becomes more responsive when they're gambling. In the case of porn, their responsiveness of the brain is actually decreased.
What does that mean, more responsive? Like it's more intense?
I think it just means they see more of the light up activity. The conversation we were having earlier about like, well, could shopping qualify? It does seem like even between gambling and porn, there are like differences that are happening if you stick yourself in an MRI.
Some of the research that I found about how porn affects the brain. sex and porn, they activate your dopamine and reward centers. So obviously when that's activated, you get the flush of happy emotion, but then over time it gets desensitized. So you need more and more and more and more intensity to get that same reward. But what I thought was really interesting specifically about porn addiction, especially as it relates to your relationships, is it impairs your cognitive function and decision-making abilities. So somebody who uses an excessive amount, they start preferring short-term gains over long-term gains, and they have an inability to accurately perceive the negative consequences of their behavior. Again, seems like a little bit of an excuse to me, but apparently, yeah, you are essentially losing your ability to cognitively function and reason, and you're also losing your ability to emotionally regulate. So at the base of this type of addiction, if we want to call it an addiction or a compulsion, is a difficulty regulating emotions. So people will seek something that stimulates that reward center in the brain. In this case, it's porn. It soothes them. And it leads to a cycle of you're looking to that thing to soothe you all the time, and you're avoiding your uncomfortable emotions, further dysregulating you to the point that you can no longer cognitively function in the same way.
Interesting.
Some external side effects of this that don't have to do with your neuroplasticity, but just like more of a perception level. People with these sorts of addictions start having performance anxiety when they do go to have actual physical sex. They start having body image concerns or even start being far more critical of their partner's bodies. There's a difference between those who watch soft porn and hardcore porn. Those who prefer soft porn are the ones that have the performance anxiety and body image issues, while those who prefer more hardcore porn start having an increase in violence and degrading behavior while they have physical sex in the real life. And it's more commonly associated with aggression, like sexual aggression too, which is very, very concerning. And it can increase things that you're already at risk for, which is why you're seeking out porn in the first place, which is depression, anxiety, loneliness. And it also increases your chances of developing other types of behavioral addictions. So this would be like your gambling.
Yeah, I stumbled across this video series that Terry Crews, do you know him? He's like an actor.
Yes. Yeah.
He 9 years ago came out with like a 3-part video series on Facebook, just like him recording himself in his car, talking about his porn addiction.
Oh.
Yeah, people like applauded him for being so open about it. But he talks about how he was addicted to porn and it changed how he thought about people. This is a quote from him. He said, "People became things to be used rather than people to be loved." And he started thinking about people as body parts. It caused a lot of problems between him and his wife. And they did stay together.
He was already married.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But his wife gave him an ultimatum, kind of. I don't even think it was an ultimatum. She was just like, "I can't deal with this. I'm leaving." And he went to therapy and like no longer is addicted.
Wow. Good for her. Honestly, I get it. She's on the money with that. And I think the way that it affects the porn viewer's perception of other people is the exact reason that we innately have this feeling of like, oh, watching a lot of porn is bad. I feel like that's a very intuitive hit that we all get, but we don't necessarily know why. And we feel a little bit judgmental even saying that. But like clearly it does affect how that person is perceiving other people. And actually in the studies, people who view a lot of porn view intimacy as a solo pleasure activity rather than something that you get vulnerable and do with another person. So when you are with another person, you can't even open up and connect in the same way. So I totally understand why either if you're a girlfriend or even like Terry Crews' wife, you definitely notice.
Yeah.
I did think that point about pleasure being a solo activity versus a connected activity was really, really interesting because I don't know how true this is, but I kind of have this perception that like as time has gone on with these younger generations, including our generation too, I'm talking like in comparison to people who grew up maybe in like the 80s or the 70s, there is sort of like a shame around sexuality or an embarrassment. Do you know what I'm saying?
You mean more so
like,
now with younger generations?
Yes, in the vulnerability aspect of it, not in like the fact that you have sex. Like I think people are way more open now than they used to be about having sex, but it feels more like a transactional thing than it used to be. And I wonder if this is because of increased porn usage where we're like, this is just physical. Like I'm just scratching a need and it's not as connected and vulnerable.
Yeah, that's interesting. I kind of think it's because of the rise of the internet that it is different. Actually, there was a term for this. Oh, the AAA engine is what some researchers call it, which is like the anonymity, affordability, and accessibility of online sexual behaviors has blown up since the internet, since the 1990s. And I think in some ways it's like, oh, people can be more open with their sexual desires because they even just know that they exist. Like, I imagine in the 80s,
Yeah.
maybe there weren't that many people talking about it. And so you didn't even know if your kink was, I don't know, like normal, quote unquote, or not. But now you can obviously get really, really niche.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think just like how the internet has made it easier to be mean to strangers, why comment sections are so mean and people will say like so much shit that they would never say to your face. Probably it's a similar effect with sex, right? Like it is just more impersonal. It's so much more accessible, but you're also like hiding behind an OnlyFans username that's anonymous. You're not like really putting yourself, your ego on the line in any kind of way. You can kind of give in to whatever, if they're like darker fantasies or whatever, and not really have any consequences. Whereas maybe in the past, even if you were going to a BDSM club or something, like there's only so many of those. You're probably gonna have to revisit it. And now it's like there's a million of these, I don't know, online chat rooms or like OnlyFans pages you can visit. So
Yeah, totally. I mean, probably like didn't even know some of this shit existed. That you like stumble upon it and you're like, oh, I have a new kink now. Like that would not have happened before.
Yeah.
So real, so real. Well, do you have any closing thoughts?
The last thing I looked at was what can you do if you're dealing with this, but also probably like our audience is mostly women. What can you do if your partner is dealing with this? And unfortunately, like because of what I was saying earlier around the money around this industry, I think a lot of the advice online is just essentially like seek professional help. Treat it as a disease, detach the person from their illness. So like try not to blame them and then like go seek out support groups and therapy. But that seems like a very paid for message. Paid for, sponsored by these rehab clinics. So I don't know. It seems like it's just like any other disagreement with your partner where it's like you need to come to a conclusion about if you can live with this, whose needs are going to matter more, or like what is the compromise if there is one. And it's a totally valid reason to end a relationship. You shouldn't feel silly or like that it's not as serious if it's porn versus in-person cheating or anything like that.
Yeah, totally. I also saw the same advice that was like, in order to treat this, you need to go into psychotherapy and like trauma therapy. I do get it on some level because, again, I don't think this is a real addiction. I think you're filling a void inside of yourself. So you need to figure out what that is and treat that, which you're probably going to need to do in therapy. However, that does not mean it's an excuse to gaslight your partner and say, well, you shouldn't be hurt by this because it's an addiction. I think that's such a terrible message. It's kind of what it sounds like. You need to like detach the action from your partner. I'm like, do I?
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that advice, but I do think if you are interested in making the relationship work, couples therapy, individual therapy like seem like great options. As I mentioned, a lot of the time sexual addiction is paired with some underlying or overlying, however you want to look at it, disorder, like a mood disorder, OCD, depression, etc. Like you can also get medication. So people do prescribe antidepressants. They will prescribe naltrexone, which they also use for alcohol and opiate dependence, and that blocks that part of the brain that feels pleasure with certain addictive behaviors. For men, you can actually take anti-androgens. Androgen is a sex hormone, and it lessens the effect of sex hormones. So you could get your partner on that.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Talk about bodily control.
Oh my God. We can just castrate them. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. I'm joking. I do think at my big age of 30, I do feel grateful to have gone through past experiences that gave me a very clear-eyed idea of what I consider cheating and what I don't consider cheating. But I think reading these articles from marriage and family therapists saying that so many people don't even consider it before they get into a situation where they're like all of a sudden confronted with the fact that they have to decide what's cheating or not. Get clear-eyed about what you're okay with and what you're not before it happens, so you don't get in this gnarly situation where like something that makes you uncomfortable happens. Then you have to decide, is it okay with me or not? And then you're like maybe adjusting your own values because you don't want to lose a relationship. Yeah. You should decide for yourself what's okay and what's not, and then have that conversation with your partner. For me personally, my line is I would not be okay with OnlyFans. I would not be okay with somebody following Instagram models and porn stars on social media. I would not be okay with anything physical, even excessive flirting. I'm a little bit more strict though. I would be okay with my partner like occasionally watching porn and masturbating. Like I don't care about that. I would be very upset if it was more than like once or twice a week.
Yeah, that's normal, I think.
I think so too. But I think there might be some people out there who are like, no, you can never watch porn, or like, I don't care if you watch porn. I don't care if you're on OnlyFans. Just never DM them, never touch them. Like the line is so different for so many people. And then if you're blurry on your line, that's when other people can take advantage of you and say like, well, why is it such a big deal? And now you're in the position of defending yourself rather than being proactive about what your boundaries are.
Yeah. I agree with your criteria. I think it'd be similar for me. I think honestly, since I haven't had experience with this, I probably would not have known to even discuss this though. So I think for me, that's the biggest eye-opening thing is like, especially for the younger folks, even younger than us, better discuss it because it's probably going to become more and more common just because kids are getting exposed to porn younger and younger. It's easier to become addicted, whether you believe that's real or not, you know?
Completely. Well, this was actually such a fascinating episode, and I'm so happy we were asked to do this. So again, if any of our listeners have topic ideas, questions that you have, definitely DM us. We will certainly look into it.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. If you enjoy the pod, we would love for you to give us a follow and rate us on Apple Podcasts, which helps us get the word out and reach new listeners. Our sources are available on Patreon, where if you choose to become a patron, you'll also get access to bonus content, our monthly book club, and our eternal gratitude.
If you'd like to get in touch or suggest a topic for a future episode, email us at everythingiknowaboutpod@gmail.com or DM us across all socials at EikaPod, that's EIKA pod. Thanks for listening and see you next week.